Hello and welcome to a live Deprogrammed with Keri Smith. I am your host, Keri, and I hope you're having a beautiful Monday here in Texas. It's warming up. We had a surprise cold front. I thought we were done with that, but I think it's over. So yesterday was beautiful. Today looks beautiful. I hope you're having a beautiful day. If you are new here, this is a live show we do Mondays and Fridays where we hang out. We talk about the crazy upside down world that we find ourselves in. And we also find moments for levity and for fun. So I hope you'll stick around. And if you're a regular, I see a lot of you in the chat. It's good to see you. I'm very excited. I have a friend, and I guess I can call her a frequent guest. She's been on the program many times. I have Deb Fillman here today from The Reason We Learn. She's an education and parental rights advocate. And I just have two quick announcements before I bring her on. For Deprogrammed Book Club, we are currently reading Critical Dilemma by Neil Shenvi and Pat Sawyer. This is about the rise of social justice ideology in the church and society. Social justice ideology being my old ideology, what we talk about a lot on the show, also colloquially known as woke ideology. You have until Thursday, March 7th. Thursday, March 7th is when we're discussing this live. And you can be on camera, you can be in the chat. So get yourself a copy of it if you want to be a part of it. I'm also going to be interviewing the authors and putting that out around the same time. So if you have questions for them based on reading this book, drop them in the comments on this video or one of the ones before we get to book club. What else? Oh, if you're in the Austin, Texas area, Minds Fest is coming back to Austin, which is very exciting. I had a blast there last year. It's going to be at the same place, the Vulcan Theater. Last year I hosted and tried my hand at being funny on stage. And to mixed results. My husband thinks I'm funny. so that's this year I don't have as much pressure. I'm going to be moderating some panels. Let's see who's going to be there. Shane Cashman from Timcast is going to be hosting. There's going to be a lot of speakers like Alex Stein, a lot of the Timcast people like Luke Radowski, Ian Crossland, let's see, Jimmy Dore. I'm very excited about Jimmy Dore being there. And Sean Fitzgerald, actual justice warrior, Lauren Chen, Ashley St. Clair. So it's a bunch of speakers. You can go to minds.com and see the full lineup. There is a super secret live podcast taping that's going to happen at the end of the day. I don't think they've announced that yet, but it's really cool. I'll tell you, it's good. You're going to be excited. I can't say what it is yet. So that's going to be Saturday, April 27th at the Vulcan Theater in Austin, Minds Fest. I hope to see you guys there. And I think that's it. Let me get rid of this. Okay. Without further ado, please welcome my friend and my guest, Deb Fillman. Hello, Deb.
Hello. How is everyone? Hi, everybody.
I see a lot of people in the chat who are already fans of yours who are saying, hello, Deb is here.
They're awesome.
Yeah. Thanks for being here. It's been a while since we've spoken in a
It's my
video.
first time in the new studio, which I love. Like the colors and everything. I just love it. It's just fantastic.
Thank you. My husband and I spent 10 weeks on this room, and I'm very happy because, when you're renovating a room, you can get in the middle of it, just like, when is this going to end? And they also, before that 10-week period, I should say, my husband and our friend David removed a whole chimney that used to be right behind me. And that took 4 days just to carry the bricks down. We have another fireplace that we're keeping, but we had to remove the one in this room. And, so there was a lot more work than just the 10 weeks. But I love it. Thanks. Welcome to the new studio.
Yeah, it's great.
Hey, so before we get into the main topic, we are going to be discussing the state of the government schools, public school system, schooling in general in the US. And we're going to be talking about surveillance. Is that a solution? What are some possible downsides to that? Before we get into that, because this was in the news recently, I wanted to show you this. I think you saw this. Uh,
I wonder.
this
I've
is
seen many things, Keri.
okay, so for anybody who didn't see this, what I'm about to show you, excellent illustration. I know there are new ones every week, but this is an excellent illustration in how the media lies, how they lie to push a narrative, and then when the truth comes out, they don't usually correct it, or if they do, they don't make a big deal about the correction. So people are left with the original false impression. So this is a story that went viral.
Yes, I did see this.
Did see this? Okay.
I shared something about this. This is
Yeah. This is this is just one of many tweets that I could have selected because this went viral and lots of people on the left were pushing it to push this narrative. And so the story goes, this father, he tweeted about how in Florida, his child, he had to sign a permission slip in order for his child to hear a guest speaker read a book, quote, written by an African American. And you can see there in the description of the event, it says students will participate and listen to a book written by an African American. Okay. So this went viral, and you can imagine on the left and all the headlines, just put into your search bar permission slip and look for news articles, and you'll see hundreds. So all the headlines were saying, Florida's so racist, right? Under DeSantis, they're so racist that they're requiring permission slips to listen to books written by Black people. That was the headline. Really. And people believed this. They believed this. And then, of course, the news came out that this is not because the book was written by a Black person. It's because of a new bill that passed in Florida where parents are receiving now permission slips for any guest speaker, any guest who comes to the classroom. The parent is going to get a permission slip about it for anyone.
Yeah.
So I just here.
This falls under be careful what you wish for. And it's why I say, a lot of these things are the action is, the reaction is the action. In other words, like we're going to put crazy stuff in the schools that cause parents to freak out and demand to be asked before their kids get to see XYZ, whatever. So parents ask, give me a permission slip because I don't want, whoever it is in the class, talking to my kid or going on a field trip to something I don't want them to go. So the government does what government does, bam, here you go, permission slip. And now the people who played fast and loose with the truth to begin with by putting all kinds of goofy stuff in the classroom come and say that was written by a human. They're going to hear by an African American. That was framing on purpose.
Oh, well, and what's crazy is
complete.
I was talking to someone on Twitter about this, and they said, why are they doing this just for books written by Black people? I said, they're not. Even the father, you have to dig for it. But you can find news articles where some journalists actually did ask the father, did you get other permission slips for other speakers? And he admitted, yes, I did. Yeah. It wasn't just this one speaker for a book written by a Black person. And then the person, of course, they change the arguments depending on the evidence. So once you show them, well, this speaker wasn't singled out, this book wasn't singled out, then they say, well, why did they have to say in the description of the permission slip, why did they have to say it's a book written by a Black person? No, they did. They said a book written by an African American. But here's why.
But I'm saying they didn't have to.
They didn't have to, but they didn't have to.
Yeah.
But the reason they did is because, first of all, it's Black History Month. And second of all, social justice and woke people have pushed this rule that we must always pay attention to and notice race and sex when it's someone in a so-called marginalized or oppressed group. I mean, I said to them, I was like, let's take one famous example. Why did President Biden feel a need to say my vice presidential pick is going to be a woman of color? Why? So you push this rule, and then when you get people to comply with it, and so the school's now complying with it, and they feel like, oh, it's important to say this person's Black because it's Black History Month, and we're going to say that so the parents know that we're being super inclusive and diverse. And then they freaking complain about it. Why did they say he's Black?
That's right.
Sorry, I could have
been either way. Could have been either way, but it was a decision. The point is, it wasn't like the law says you have to specify the race of the person reading the book.
Right. They don't have to say that, but they did.
They could have been a Holocaust survivor, and they might have written, if they wanted to, they'll hear a book read by a Holocaust survivor, and everybody would go, oh, that's wonderful. We would hope. Except some segment of the population be like, this is propaganda.
Or a book written by a Jewish author. Why did it say Jewish? Why? Oh my gosh. People would be mad no matter what. If
Florida parents outraged.
Yeah. If they didn't mention the author's race, the same people would be outraged that his race wasn't mentioned, you know?
Of course. Naturally.
So,
or why are you spending any part of Black History Month going to hear books, going to hear books by somebody? Oh, it was a Black person. Oh, okay, that's fine.
Yeah. It's just ridiculous. Anyway, great illustration this week. I just thought I would pull this out and show you. It's a great illustration of just how false so many of these stories are, and the amount of time and attention and ink that the journalists at the press spend on pushing hoaxes like this is incredible. And then you get people that you may know online on social media or in your life who they only heard the first version of the story because that's the one that went viral and huge and that all the media did headlines about. And so they believe this, and they'll say to you, you're like, well, in Florida, you have to get permission to hear a speaker read a book by a Black person. No, you don't. That's not why. They're getting permission slips for everyone. Okay. Just a couple things from the chat. Pirate Tomsky. Hello, Pirate. He says, the book was probably called How to Teach Your Kids to Have Sex.
Probably not. That's the thing is, like, now, like I said, when you ask for the government to make a rule that gives you the right to give permission for anything that is not part of the regular curriculum, that means anything, like everything. You're going to the library and they're going to read you, Hop on Pop. And you might have to, if it's a trip to the library, they're going to send home a permission slip. So this was it said library. It's a location library. Now, my understanding is that it meant the library, not the media center at the school. So on top of that, it was like a trip. So I think it was a permission slip on two fronts, not just you're going to have an author come into the school and read, but you might even have to have been leaving and going to the library so that multiple schools could have come. I'm not 100% certain on that, but they certainly didn't make it clear. And it just said library. Usually school libraries are called media centers these days, or resource centers. They don't call it library. Anymore. We do. We old people call it the school library, but they don't call it that.
I can't keep up with all the kids' lingo.
Okay. No, it's all new now because media center is like the new thing. So who knows?
One more quick announcement I forgot to make, Deb, if you'll allow me to do this just quickly. I see someone here, Clem, says, I heard about Keri yesterday, so here I am. Welcome. I think I saw you in the chat maybe for the show I forgot to mention at the beginning. Yeah. My pastor from the Church on the Square, Bradley Helgerson, he was on Benjamin Boyce's Conversations yesterday. And I think it's a great conversation. So if you haven't heard it, go on over there and take a listen later. But the two of them together, Benjamin Boyce is so thoughtful and my pastor's very thoughtful. And I thought they vibed very well. Okay. So can you tell me, I want to get into the state of the public school system in general. And I want to talk about something you've been talking about that I don't know if I fully understand, which is surveillance in the schools. So before we get into that, let's just talk about in your mind, where are we now versus a few years ago even?
Well, we have more parents aware that the schools are a disaster, and it's not a question of failure anymore. It's a question of harm. So I think we've gotten a fair amount of parents who are woken up to the reality that this is beyond kids can't read and can't do math, but schools are engaging in activities that actively harm students, whether it's from their mental health programs or bringing health care into the building and counseling into the building and doing almost group therapy in the classrooms, that they're sort of practicing medicine without a license, not medicine, but therapy without a license. And so I think there are you've got sort of three groups of parents. parents who are just now coming to the realization, like, wait, the kids can't read. So that's like one group of parents, probably the largest group. They're really waking up to the failure aspect. But then you've got these other groups that are larger now than they were 3 years ago of this goes beyond the kids can't read and the schools are doing bad stuff.
Mhm.
And then you've got super activated parents who are saying the bad stuff needs to end yesterday. Like this is all hands on deck. We got to fix it. That's a small group, but we're building these coalitions of parents who are increasingly aware that their kids' education is in crisis.
I see some of these literacy rates, Moms for Liberty, Tiffany Justice, they do a good job of keeping these in the spotlight, and they're just appalling.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
you don't see that in the mainstream news. It's not something that they're talking about how the schools are failing kids.
Well, because remember, they put the porn in the schools. That obviously gets your attention. So everybody's like, oh my God, there's porn in the schools. And we spend a year talking about porn in the schools, which is a lovely little distraction from the kids can't read the books anyway. Or that's why the porn is in, graphic novel form. Like, did anyone wonder why they're bringing more graphic novels in? Yeah. Or they're using audiobooks and so on. So a lot of these, I'm very cynical at this point. And I think a lot of the crazy stuff from Drag Queen Story Hour to how much porn is in the library was, how far can we go? First of all, there's your element of the population that's how far can we push this envelope, this Overton window? And then you have the segment that allows it to continue. Maybe didn't put it there because this is working. Look, they're looking over there. And they're not looking over here. Because for a while, we were on the precipice of getting good and mad about the science of reading and how it hadn't been employed for over 30 years. And that's why kids couldn't read. And we were right there where it was like, this is just a change. And people were about to lose jobs. People were getting voted out of office. And lo and behold, porn. I'm sorry. I've reached the point in covering this stuff where I don't think there's any such thing as a coincidence anymore. And obviously this was building for a long time, the queer theory and Marxism and stuff that's coming into our schools anyway. But people have asked me, but why didn't anyone stop it? Like, why, it's not like somebody saw the book when it came in the school and had to have been like, this is new, right?
Yeah.
Why didn't they stop it? Well, many, many reasons. And I genuinely believe one of them is it created a very nice distraction, plus an easy thing to pin on your political enemies that they want to censor and ban books and things. We can dominate the news cycle with so-called book banning, which is not even banning. It's like,
it's not banning.
Can we curate out the age inappropriate material, right? Like just go back to like books for children in the children's space. And because they can frame it any old way they want, there it is. And then I come in and I might say to people like, guys, I think it's time for us to refocus on the literacy component and not let that get away from us. And it's, so you don't care that there's porn in the library? Like, no, I care greatly. Obviously, I've fought with you for a year, but I think we're reaching a point of diminishing returns where the focus on that is not helping what we're trying to do. And it's adding a lot of great, first of all, those book publishers are making bank. Every bookstore you go into, look at our banned book selection.
Yeah.
Obviously not banned books.
Stupid. Obviously not banned. They're sitting there. That's one of the dumbest lies I wish we could just figure out how to dispense with. It's like, children don't have unfettered access to the internet at their schools. Of course not. There are sexually inappropriate sites that they're not going to be able to access. It's the same thing with the library. It's a children's library in a public school. It should not have porn. It doesn't have Penthouse. Nobody's like, oh, why was Penthouse banned? It's not banned. You can get it anywhere you want.
The Bible isn't in there.
The Bible's not in there, but
Bible's not in there.
You can get this, so, I've seen the genderqueer books like that. It's like, they don't belong there.
No.
Okay. But what you're saying, I want to focus on this because this is interesting. Yeah. This is maybe why Tiffany Justice and who I mentioned in Moms for Liberty have been posting more about the failing literacy rates is trying to get the attention back where it should be, instead of just fighting in this. It's almost like you're saying they've got us fighting over here. They successfully got us fighting something egregious like porn in schools or Drag Queen Story Hour, et cetera. And then so that we're not fighting over here to make sure that they're actually.
Well, it just takes our eye off the ball. And I'm not suggesting for a second that the people fighting the porn were like wrong to do so. It's just that it gets you into a feedback loop or a narrative arc that we didn't create. The people who put the material, James Lindsay talks about this all the time, the sort of Freirean generative theme. It's like, we'll put the material out there, get people talking about it in the classroom. Paulo Freire wanted kids to talk about their suffering. So they seed the material with stories of suffering to get the kids to ask questions about suffering, to get you to be able to talk about revolution. I think that some of this content was seeded to get this narrative arc going. The leftists don't do things by accident. Like everything, Cloward Piven, anybody who reads, Saul Alinsky, these choices, these decisions are made for a variety of reasons, and they're all intentional. And and generally one of those reasons is to drive a reaction on the part of your enemies. And then you leverage the reaction and you keep going. So I think what they've realized, same as I've realized, is, okay, we've got an apparatus in place to fight that now. We've got some people focusing on book challenges. We've got to, from a national standpoint, we got to focus on literacy, because every parent cares about that. Mm-hmm. Right? So we can get away from these they've made it partisan. All right, let's get away from that. Because whether people like it or not, Moms for Liberty is not a partisan organization. I keep saying it, but nobody believes it. It's true.
Except for the people in the cult, they do believe it. But
yeah, they do. But that's the thing, is they'll say anything is partisan if it suits their purposes, because that's what they do. That's not to say that, people are more aligned with one side than the other. I mean, that just happens. That happens with any issue, as you can imagine, but it doesn't make the organization itself partisan. Right. I hope it's okay, since you titled this about surveillance, I hope it's okay if I spend a little bit explaining what the term means, because I think immediately people run to cameras. And I am talking about that lately and quite a bit, because people are begging for it. I don't know who the people are. I'm wondering if that's let's do.
This is something, when I've had you on before, I don't remember if I would say like we disagreed. It's just I don't have an opinion on some things yet, because I haven't read enough about it. So, for example, this is in the news a lot. A lot of conservatives like Matt Walsh have pushed for cameras in the classroom when parents started to become aware of just how terrible things are, and how teachers are bringing this ideology into public schools. We saw conservatives like Walsh say, hey, well then, the solution to this is to have cameras in the classroom so parents can monitor and see what's being taught. And you are coming less from a conservative perspective, that seemingly some conservatives support that. You're coming more from the libertarian perspective, where you're saying, wait a minute, there are obvious downfalls to the government surveilling children. So let's start from there. If you want to define surveillance, yes.
Well, I think it's important to define surveillance, because surveillance is not just cameras, and we need to understand that our kids are being surveilled by the government every moment of their day just by being in school. So, for example, I don't know if I can bring up a screen. Is it okay if I bring up a screen? Okay. So I want to show you guys, because I think this is actually really important, that students there's an infographic there. Okay. Anytime the government gathers data from students in the course of being associated with a school, it's called surveillance. So just because it's not necessarily video or audio doesn't mean they aren't surveilling or keeping tabs on, keeping records on everything that your child does. So all of these things in these circles, observations of the teacher, which get noted down now electronically, tests, demographic information that parents fill out when they register the child for school, information about the teacher themselves in relation to the students, what program, their attendance, any interventions they're getting, their grades, all of that is data. It's considered surveillance data there's district, it goes to the State Department of Ed, the U.S. Department of Ed, and it includes personally identifiable information, de-identified information, aggregate, all of this stuff. Look who it's used by. Obviously, parents can get grades and so forth. Teachers and principals use it for a variety of reasons, some of which we don't know. Service providers, that would be your consultants, your private companies, the SEL companies, DEI companies, all these companies, they access the data. Sometimes they buy it. Sometimes they just have access to it through, public information if it's de-identified data. Researchers, both government researchers and researchers at Castle, researchers at West Ed, researchers at these consulting firms that are self-interested because they develop programs and curricula for schools, and the general public. So for example, what does that look like? Well, I've talked to people about this before, the nation's report card. This is where the public can go in and look at some of the data surveillance. Obviously, it's de-identified. I don't know which students got these scores, but I can look at what happened in different districts. Then you have the National Center for Education Statistics. This thing is a treasure trove of data, also de-identified, but it does have lots of demographic data. You can get down to sex. You can get down to, at this point, we're getting down to sexual, identification data. They're getting more and more granular of what you can find and use. And anyone can use this. Private corporations can, anybody can use this data. And this is just at the level of where they're just collecting from forms, tests, et cetera. Now, what I want people to remember is that every single kid in school today is equipped with a one-to-one device, a Chromebook or some kind of a tablet. So they're already connected electronically for pretty much from kindergarten on. They're giving kids in kindergarten access to these things. It's not a textbook world anymore. So already you've got a device. Everything the kid does on the device, especially if they're using apps and so forth, is being gathered, and that data is being gathered. And
the way that, let me pause there for 1 second.
Yeah.
Because the way they publicize this, I remember when Chromebooks in the classroom first became a thing, and you would see news articles about it, and it's always presented in this very positive light. And of course, the first time you're hearing about it, it sounds positive. It's like, oh, they have enough funds to make sure every kid in the classroom has Google is donating Chromebooks, like Google is, thank you, Google. And it doesn't,
what could possibly be in it for Google? I can't imagine. Right. Data is like the new oil. People need to understand. And children, who are the youngest of humans, obviously are the most valuable, because if they can collect data and then use data to affect the materials that go back into the school, that affect what the child learns and thinks and believes about the world and the country, we can now pretty much socially engineer and program our market, our customers, our citizens, our voters, whatever it is that we, the people doing all the data mining, want to influence. The more data we have when they're itty bitty, the more we can affect what's going into their brains. So our children are already being surveilled to a large degree to see what they're doing. Teachers, obviously, to a lesser degree, but as I will show in my Dissident Dispatch show tonight, we saw during COVID when they came into our living rooms and whatever on the screens, and we can see if you take 5 minutes and go to the social media accounts of your kids' teachers, the superintendent, the principal, et cetera, they're not hiding it. They're like 20, 30 goals, SDG goals. We're teaching this. SEL is the greatest thing since sliced bread. We have our gender corn that we're teaching. They're not hiding it. So the idea that somehow we're going to discover something by surveilling the classrooms more than what we've already seen is already a little weird. But by putting another layer of government surveillance, because it would be government surveillance. If you put cameras or recording devices of any kind into the schools, they are the property of the district. They're not the property of the parents any more than the teachers or the employees of the parents. That's the biggest lie I want parents to get through their head, is the teacher doesn't work for you. The teacher works for the district. The school board works for the district. Nobody works for you. Okay. Let's get that clear in a very literal sense. They don't work for you. You can tell yourself all day long they do.
Say, but it's my tax dollars, so they work.
How's that working out for you? Once it left your hand, once it left your paycheck, it is not yours anymore. It's like that scene in Office Space where the guy goes, well, it becomes ours, like to the little extra pennies. It's theirs. The second they collected it, it's theirs to do with what they want. And you have to go and beg and scream at the school board and please, pretty please do whatever. And they do what they want anyway, because ultimately it's a compulsory tax system. You don't get to say, I don't want to pay anymore. And it's a compulsory attendance system. The only way you can say my kid's not in there anymore is if you tell them what you're going to do instead. So all of that compulsion, and people are still going, it's mine, I own it. I'm like, how do you own something that you have no say in what's going on? You really don't. And all of these decisions are made. There's like layers of decision making where parents don't have a say in any of this. And so once you say, please, pretty please, government, puts these devices in the classroom and go ahead and charge us, put a budget together and charge us for whatever it is, that the cameras and the footage, this is very crucial, belongs to the district/the government. It belongs to the government. Now, already all the surveillance information I told you about goes to the federal, state, and federal government. The federal government keeps it for 70 years. Okay. So all that data. And the school district probably keeps it for less amount of time, but that means at any point in time, some political person could come in and decide to use that data a different way. Well, the same could hold true of the footage. You come in, you record things, you get all the technical aspects to get through, which I don't even want to get into, the legalities, the funding, and the supervision, and the possibility of hacking and corruption, because somebody's always got an answer of, no, it's easy, just hook it up to a webcam and stick it onto what did somebody tell me, put on Rumble? And I'm like, have you read a law recently, a privacy law in any state? You can't just stick a webcam recording all of these human beings that aren't you or your kid and funnel it into anybody's house. Like, think about that for 2 seconds and then get back to me. But we also have something called FERPA. And a lot of people aren't aware of what FERPA is, and that is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. It provides certain rights for parents regarding their children's education records. The guide provides general information, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't really have teeth. Like, parents would have to sue. Parents have to put in requests to get records and so on. But when you get down to who owns video that includes your child, and it is impossible in today's classroom to record a classroom that won't capture kids. It's not the 1950s. It's not a teacher sits at the desk for an hour and the kids are all backs to the back wall and we're facing the teacher. That's not how it works. The teacher maybe is at the front for a little while, then milling around the room. The kids are at tables. The kids are facing the back, the front, the side. They're in little groups. Go on anybody's social media from a school. You'll see it. The kid, you can't avoid seeing the kid. They're everywhere. So unless somebody's going to go in and blur out all the faces of the people we don't want to see, right? Put super high fidelity, like, listening devices to capture clearly only the teacher speaking and not anybody else. So then when we want to release the footage to the 1 parent, 2 parent, 3 parents who are asking for it on any given day, we're not violating the privacy of the other students, right? It's like, they already have to do a FOIA request to just get what's going on in there that's not publicly available. And that can take 45, 60 days. It's not free. There's a whole process. So what you're essentially saying is, I truly believe that if there are cameras there, people will change their behavior. So that's the argument I usually get is, well, cameras change people's behavior for the better. Like, the assumption is the teachers won't teach the bad things if they're being recorded. But we know that's not true. They're proud of it. The ones who do it are proud of it. The ones who don't do it are busy trying to get away with not doing it, because remember,
Well,
they get audited.
here's my question. I have several. Let me just start with this one. Why would the government is currently pushing things like critical race theory, DEI, SEL, okay?
Yeah.
So if you set up the cameras because, let's say you're a conservative parent and you have kids in the public school system and you want to know if the teachers are pushing any of this, what is having footage of it? How is that going to help you? Because we already know that the government's pushing it, right?
That's what I've said.
Okay.
That's what I've said. So you have a whole new technological system that they can record that much more data that they get to hold on to as long as they want and use any old way they want in the age of AI and deepfakes. In the age of cancel culture, where government has been known to look at the J6ers, government has been known to set people up and do all kinds of stuff and all these kinds of things. Yes, teachers make TikTok videos bragging about it. I have told people, like, what don't you know? It's like, we all had that friend. The friend who says, a few of my friends told me they saw my husband out with another woman at this hotel bar. And then I heard another thing about he was doing this, and he's been gone late nights, and there's weird messages on his phone, and he hides his phone. He does all these things. I'm really suspicious. I think he's cheating on me. Okay. So it's like, well, how sure are you? Yeah, I'm like 99% sure he's cheating on me. Okay, what are you going to do? Well, I'm going to pay somebody a bunch of money to follow him around with a camera and record him doing it. Okay, and then you're going to get divorced, right? Well, no, I'm just going to keep paying the detective to follow him around for the rest of our lives so I can watch. So at the end, when you get the footage up, there he is, he's cheating. What are you going to do? You're going to go, I caught you cheating. Don't cheat anymore. He's already cheating. Or are you going to leave? And how many of us have said to our friend, if you're that suspicious that you're going to pay somebody big bucks to follow your spouse around and record your spouse and spy on your spouse, maybe the issue is it's time to go. Like
Something's
your
wrong.
marriage sucks and you need to get out of it or do something, fish or cut bait, because that level of suspicion is unhealthy for you. It's unhealthy for the other person, whether you hate them or not, because they're cheating. It's the whole thing is built on an unhealthy thing. So with schools, I tell people the same thing. If you are so suspicious that you want to record every move that teacher makes, what justification do you have to continue to send your children into that environment? And then they'll come back. This is what they come back with. Okay, body cams for my kid. Okay, well, we have that. It's called a cell phone. But if you don't want the kid to have ownership and you to have ownership of the data, I don't like cell phones in the classroom because it interferes with academic learning. But if they're there, at least you own the data. At least you own the technology. Same with the body cam. However, do you want to have the conversation with your child to say, honey, so now, look, come here. I'm going to put your body cam on to record your teacher. Make sure your teacher's not doing anything wrong. We're just going to record all the things that happen all day.
I'm sorry. I'm just thinking about how this is like a Black Mirror episode. And it's also, I mean, kids have the world that we're living in now, kids have so much less privacy than even we did growing up. I mean, there's so many things that people put online that it's sort of like, oh, that would be better in your private journal. Like you don't need to put that on, you're sharing. And I'm just imagining kids, you have no private moments. You've got this body cam. It's going to restrict your creativity, your freedom, your connections with other students, like
or conversely, we know what these have done. They've created a performative narcissist culture where kids stage fights, they provoke things, they provoke teachers, they do all kinds of stuff. Now, if they know that the teacher's being recorded, see, the presumption behind this whole Matt Walsh thing is being on camera makes you behave better, which, by the way, is a totalitarian mindset, just so you know. Okay. We'll talk about the panopticon too, but it makes people behave, period, properly, according to some standard, which of course we all agree with. We all agree what the standard should be of behavior, don't we, Keri? There aren't 50% of the parents who actually like the books in the library and like the CRT and like the DEI. Remember them? They exist too.
So my initial, when I first heard Matt Walsh, for example, talking about cameras in classrooms, my initial reaction to it was like, yeah, you should be able to see what the teachers are teaching without having thought about it much. It was like,
sure.
And then I started hearing some of the more libertarian critics like you talking about it. And I think I understand what some of the downfalls are, but I want you to tell us what they are. What are some of the downsides of doing this? Because I think this is probably where maybe this is a conservative and libertarian difference, but conservatives are thinking, we need the government to protect students from teachers by putting these cameras in there so we get footage of exactly what's happening. Okay, so what are the holes in that reasoning?
There's several. Okay, so obviously the cost, but let's dispense with that. Taxpayer dollars. I'm always loath to do that. I don't like giving them another line item to spend money on. Then you have the fact that people genuinely do change their behavior when they know they're being recorded. That goes for teachers, students, everybody in the building. And it's not always for the better. So we know right now that after the Supreme Court made its decision to ban affirmative action, let's say, in terms of admissions, and everybody believed that was going to solve it. They can't do it anymore, right? The Supreme Court said, well, I'm here to tell you as a tutor who specializes in college essays and applications, they are still doing it. They've just baked it into the essay questions. They phrase them in such a way and so on. I've looked at enough curriculum to know, and again, I'm going to show some tonight. I've looked at enough curriculum to know. I've looked at enough Chromebook assignments and things that kids are looking at on screens that the cameras would never catch. What screen of a screen of that they put the indoctrination already so deeply into every choice they've made about what they're teaching that the teacher doesn't actually talk that much. The teacher already is not necessarily the source of the majority of the indoctrination. The teacher is a presenter. The indoctrination is happening in the entire structure of the curriculum, the structure of the building, the structure of the composition of the classes, who's in what class, and how the grading system works, and how we discipline or don't discipline. So how you do social engineering is not a person standing in front of the room like some bad movie going, and now we will learn about how we will think this way. It doesn't work like that. It's much more subtle. So
That's like, that reminds me of, just a quick aside, where people are like, "Oh, critical race theory is not being taught." And I'm like, "Yeah, because they
exactly,
don't stand at the blackboard and say, 'And today we'll learn critical race theory.'"
that's
No,
exactly right.
they put it into the curriculum, like
That's right.
it's what the curriculum is based on. It's
Right. And so you're not going to catch that on video. It's like, so people want an easy button where they can just go, I'll sit and watch video and I'll go, aha. And I'm sitting there telling them, like, guys, I could tell you based on reading, federal education policy, state education policy, there's not a state in the United States right now where DEI and equity is not literally mandated. Okay. So just right out of the gate, it's there. I'm telling you, it's there. Now, you don't have to believe me. I can give you a couple quick searches. You'll find it in 5 minutes. So it's not about, is there indoctrination happening? It's there. Okay. And see, Lone Dissenter said it. The government is the one making the teachers teach these things. So now there are a few holdouts. There are teachers out there like, what I'm going to do? I'm going to close my door and I'm going to teach my students how to think. I'm going to teach them Socratic method. I'm going to tell them to question stuff while nobody's watching. They're the ones who are going to get caught. They're the ones when you stick the camera in the classroom, suddenly the last good teacher in your school who's trying their hardest. Now, if you follow me, you follow Ramona Bessinger. You know Ramona Bessinger. Ramona Bessinger was in Rhode Island schools. And when she tried to do that, and this is without cameras, her own students turned her in. The little Maoists and Soviets in her own class. By the way, they're already trained to do this. The cameras are only going to make it easier to back them up. And they go in the report that evil Ms. It wasn't really her students, it was another class. Her students loved her, but students found out that she was teaching like what we would like, and not CRT, and they can't fire her because of union stuff, and she had tenure, but they stuck her in a room where she can't have access to any students. And she has to show up in order to collect her paycheck and not be, fired for not, showing up. She has to show up and not teach. And this is what I'm afraid could happen to the last dissonant teachers who are the last holdouts of reason in our schools, trying to help kids read, trying to help kids do the right thing.
They're the ones that are punished by it. Yeah. This is a great illustration. Thank you for spelling this out, because I think about the teachers I've interviewed in the past and former teachers like Frank McCormick, Chalkboard Heresy. When they find out that you're not teaching the DEI, you're not pushing the ideology, then it's a problem, and
you're mentally ill.
Yeah,
that's what they tried with him. And what I am concerned about with the students, because like I said, there's no way to record without capturing students. And we already know that students have been punished because they received a punch. Will you provoke them? What did you do? Let's have restorative justice. You have power over them, and you have power and privilege and they don't, and therefore this and therefore that. That this kind of footage could be used to target or get retribution against students whose parents go to school board meetings, whose parents speak out, whose parents fight back, whose parents just say something random on social media. And picture this scenario. There's cameras in the classrooms in your school. You're the parent and you're frustrated. Your kid brought home an assignment, and you look at the assignment and now it's in your face. They're already in your face, indoctrination, anti-Christian, anti-everything. And you're reading going, this is outrageous. And you put something on your social media and you go, this is what's happening at my kid's school. And the principal sees it, or another student sees it, or another parent sees it, whatever. And they go back and they lie in wait. Maybe they even figure out a way to provoke your kid. Poke. Jesus is wrong. Jesus is bad. Who knows what they say? And the kid speaks up and says something, and it's like, oh, antisocial personality disorder. You need to go see the counselor or whatever. And now they've got it on video, and they can isolate that little thing of, look, your kid did X, taken totally out of context, because they own it. They're the government. Government never takes any footage out of context, does it, J6 observers?
Right.
I mean, think about this. Just think it through. And what I've been trying to tell people is you have to understand that when you ask the government to surveil you or your kids, you are handing them a permission slip to use it to abuse you. Well, how many people are sick of being patted down at the airport? We all, I wouldn't say, well, I didn't, but be like, oh, yes, please. I want federalized security, and I don't want this to be up to a private corporation. They missed it. It was because they were private that they missed it. No, maybe it was the CIA and the FBI not, dropping the ball. But no. We've got to have the federal government own our security. And now we're getting felt up, and they're confiscating our things, and they're getting all up in our business and no fly lists and whatever. I'm just saying, be careful what you wish for, because as bad as all this stuff is, and why am I here? Why do I spend all day, every day researching this stuff? I obviously agree it's bad. I obviously don't want it in the classroom, but I'm telling you, it's there. You don't need to watch. And then the final thing I'll say is, who's going to be doing the watching? You think you're going to do it? Like I said, after we get through the FOIA process, let's say, and you get these hours of footage, you know what you're looking for? You know what you're looking at? Do you know the exact date and time? I mean, how many kids come home and go, at exactly 2:13 p.m. on Monday, the such and such, mom, my teacher said X. So you can go FOIA that exact thing. Otherwise, you'd be like, sometime last month, my kid told me this after I finally pulled it out of him because he came home depressed for the 17th day in a row. And I dragged it out of him that something was going on at school. And I now need to see the footage from that whole month.
So you have to do a FOIA request to be able to get it, and not knowing a specific date range or.
And remember, you have to do that FOIA request in part because those other students and the teacher, but more so the students, have certain privacy. Like, you don't get to just show me, like, the idea that you're going to live stream this to Rumble is hilarious to me. As if there's no such thing as privacy laws, and parents don't sign permission slips at the beginning of every year going, my child may be on camera, may not be. And then how do you square that? Already it's, my child may be recorded by the school district or have their picture taken or may not. Now, I grant you, a lot of districts have gotten sneaky and made it an opt-out. It used to be an opt-in. So you'd have to say, yes, you may. Now it's, no, you may not. So most parents don't read the papers. They don't sign it. And that's why their pictures, that schools are posting their pictures and their videos all over social media right now. But when you want to go because you're looking to get to the school, don't you think they're going to throw sand in your gears? Well, you're going to fill out this form and that form and the other form. And we're going to need to get permission from these people and these people and these people, because they can. They're going to slow you down. Do you think they're going to throw their own teacher who's doing what they want anyway under the bus? I just think the logic doesn't follow. Like, you aren't going to play ideology cop on these schools anymore. It's done.
Lone dissenter in the chat.
Yes, thank you.
Sorry, that's funny. Dear government, please show me all the CRT at my school. LOL.
No, I mean, for real. Like, please show me the groomer teacher that you hired and promoted and put on your social media as a great person. Look, we don't have cameras now, but in North Carolina, there are multiple, not just one, like many, hundreds of convicted sex offenders who were not only not stripped of their licenses, they were just moved around like little chess pieces. Go talk to people in New York. It's even worse. So we have a Republican director of public instruction right now. And we're trying to get her out of office and elect somebody else, but another Republican. But, we already know they're convicted sex offenders, and the government of the state, the Department of Public Instruction, is not moving heaven and earth to keep them away from children.
Yeah.
So what do you think having video footage? I mean, I suppose if you caught video footage of them actually raping a child, maybe you could get them to do something. But do you really think that's going to happen? Or do you think the teachers are a little smarter than that? And you know where most of the violence happens and most of the bullying happens, even by teachers? In the bathroom. You can't put cameras in there for the obvious reason. So when 90% of the bad things that are physical happen in bathrooms, locker rooms, and private spaces that you can't by law put cameras, and when the ideology indoctrination is happening out in the open, but not from the teacher's mouth, it's in the Chromebook. Parents, what I hear when parents tell me they want cameras, when Matt Walsh tells me he wants cameras, it tells me two things. You either don't have kids in the school, Matt doesn't, he homeschools, or you have not looked at your kid's Chromebook in a very long time. Sorry for the balloons.
What's that? What are the balloons?
It's something to do with my Mac. My Mac doesn't. I haven't been able to turn it off. So there it is. I'm telling you that is a signal to me that the person, or they don't have kids at all. They don't have kids, and they just want to weigh in on something they don't really have full skin in the game on, like they do have skin in the game of
And Matt Walsh
society.
doesn't have kids in the public school system.
No. So,
So
how would he know? I mean, I'm sorry. He is just incorrect. It is not 1955, and the teacher's not standing in front of the room speaking loudly about the CRT.
yeah.
And even if you did, and even if they were, as you pointed out, the school supports it, thinks it's awesome.
It.
They don't even call it CRT. We'll hear it as CRT, but they'll go, no, that's culturally responsive learning. What are you talking about? What? No, that's social emotional learning. No, that's character education. So they have all their new words. And then finally, the last thing is, I know the Supreme Court said the teachers don't have full freedom of speech to say anything they want in the classroom. And especially in Florida, they're literally precluded from talking about certain subjects. But don't you think they've figured out sneaky little ways to talk about the things they're not allowed to talk about without talking about them? Of course they are. They put it into the written material. They put it into the Chromebook. They've gotten around it. In Florida, they're getting around it by putting it in the AP classes, because an AP class is a college level class. So while the law says you can't have in K-12, even though it's in the K-12 building, it's a college level class. So that's where they stash the CRT, is in the AP classes. So, and SEL is CRT. It really bothers me. I mean, I think that DeSantis is mean well, but when you have Casey DeSantis pushing like a character education thing, and I look through the materials, I'm like, well, that's straight up SEL, which is social justice oriented.
I saw that. I think I took it as ignorance.
I think they don't know. And that's what I'm telling you. So you have all this footage and you're listening to all the talk. Are you going to know what you're hearing?
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to know what you're looking at? And if, let's say you do, let's say you've watched 17,000 hours of James Lindsay and read the entire New Discourse's website and all the books, and you hear it and you go, that's Marxism, that's communism, that's this, that's the other. Good luck making that case. Where? In court? So that was my point. They have freedom of speech to the point of, if they say words that are a little ambiguous as to what it is, and there isn't a law in your state against them talking about those concepts or those ideas, which is really tough to make laws about that, as I've just stated, then what's your argument?
They're going to argue freedom of speech, and yes.
Or at least they're going to say, that's not what I meant. That's not what I said. You're reading stuff into it. You're a crazy person. And then finally, even if you could convince them that's what they said or they meant, they're going to slap on their wrist. It's like, okay, don't do that again. Okay, thanks, bye. What is your recourse? Like, what is it that you want to happen? Do you really think they're going to fire a teacher because a teacher stood in front of the room even and said, well, I personally think Mao Zedong had a great idea. I personally think that was actually, that they just, capitalism is bad and communism's just never really been tried. There are laws on the books in California right now making it illegal to teach positive things about Marxism, about communism. How's that working out? There also is now a law that's saying that they have to take ethnic studies, which is communist. They violate their own laws every day. A law is only as good as its enforcement. And the way that people like Soros and et cetera have figured out how to dismantle America is not by changing the Constitution and rewriting our laws. It's by just putting people in the DA's office and in the school districts and the places that would hold these people accountable who won't hold them accountable.
Or so it's also by changing the dictionary, changing the meaning of words. The Constitution is no good. It doesn't matter. They don't need it. They don't need to change the Constitution if they change what the words mean.
So what are you surveilling? And what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Now you see it and you're like, oh, there it is. The only purpose that would serve, and I'm sorry, if you need your fellow taxpayers to pay millions of dollars to put cameras in and record everybody's kids and give the government all kinds of footage they could use for not good reasons, okay? If you need that to be persuaded that maybe it's time to homeschool, shame on you. Shame on you for obliging everybody else with a system. That's what the Homeland Security thing did. That's what the airport security did, is to assuage the fragile feelings and fears of some people. We now have a much bigger surveillance state than we had before. Are we actually safer? And people say, well, it hasn't been a hijacking, but are we actually safer from the people who really mean us the biggest threat, which is our government? And I submit to you that no, we're not. We had the Twitter files. We've had, Edward Snowden has spent the rest of his life in Russia because he came out and said the NSA is listening to all of our conversations and storing the data. Like, how much more do you want in terms of government surveillance? I want zero.
Do you think that conservatives are a little more vulnerable to these pushes for government surveillance than liberals are? Because I'm immediately I'm thinking of post 9/11 when they pushed the Patriot Act and you had conservatives on board with it, and
Yep.
it did many things, allowing them to use surveillance on American citizens. I mean, even to have a right to go into your bank account and see if you have transactions over a certain. The government has no reason to be in my bank account, but we gave it to them. Now it seems
Nikki Haley's
normal.
the one who wants to ban TikTok. I think TikTok's poison, but she wants to ban it. She wants things like the Fairness Act and other kinds of restrictions on social media, whatever, ostensibly to protect us. From time immemorial, all of the things that have given the government more power over us in terms of surveillance have been not only supported, but introduced by Republicans. That's just, I do genuinely believe that people, law and order type people who actually think, like, I obey the law, blah, blah, they don't understand. Their argument is, if you have nothing to hide, what do you care? That is the worst possible apology that you could make for increased government surveillance. That's what they say in China. That's what they said in the Soviet Union and East Germany. It's not about, it's not about what, like whether you have something to hide. It's about what could be made up. And as I said, in the age of AI and deepfakes and the abuse that has been done to children, the grooming, the exploitation, the trafficking, all this trans stuff, why would we want to put cameras more in a space where our children are? Now, if you want to send your kids to a private school where they have nanny cams for safety, and like daycares have nanny cams, if you want that and it's private and you choose that and the private entity owns the footage and you have access to it because it's all 100% private, and you sign contracts that they'll be guilty of fraud if they don't do it right, that's a different issue. The difference between state surveillance and private surveillance is night and day. So I'm not suggesting that it's always bad to watch your child's caregivers. That is not what I'm saying. I'm saying that in this case, because it's the government who would be doing it, it's really, it's a big problem.
That's a great distinction. Actually, 16-bit mascot in the chat says defunding schools is a good option. Privatize it all.
It is. That's what I want.
Hey, Yarn Chicken and Shit is in here. Hello. She says, absolutely, conservatives
100%.
are half the problem on this.
I would say more than half, because the reactions have been since the outset not constructive. In other words, not, hey, look at this, kids can't read, they can't do math, and they're putting porn in the schools. You know what schools should look like? Schools should look like this. Let's go build a parallel system that's private. Let's find some people to donate to it. So instead of donating their money to Castle and all these organizations that feed into the public system, let's pour our money and so forth and so on and time into building up a viable, affordable, truly private system to demonstrate how it should work. But instead, they got on board with government-funded school choice so they could just get their government cheese for their private companies that they like. Yeah, they're more than half the problem, because now they're going to make sure that the private system is made public by increasing the size of government, and they're going to call it freedom. Yay, we made you more free by adding more government. Like, that's what Republicans do.
You're going to bring the government into private schools, essentially, is what you're saying.
Precisely. And people say, you're against school choice. I'm like, okay, that's like saying you don't think Black Lives Matter because you're against Black Lives Matter, the organization. Like, obviously, that's not what I said. That's why they named it school choice, so that people like me would have to shut up or sound like we don't want parents to have choices. Of course I want parents to have choices. I just want their choices to be actual choices, not just, can I please choose my prison cell? Pretty please.
I love you, Deb. You have a way of explaining things. I'm like, I'm not really sure what I think about that. Let me talk to Deb and see if she can make it more clear.
Make it make sense.
It's like a school choice. I never thought of that, but it's exactly one of those cases where they name something to try and influence how you think about it. And just because I tend to, agree with school choice, it sounds good to me. But you're right. It's just like saying, what was that example someone gave in my chat once? It was so good. Oh, Best Buy. Do you think they have all the Best Buys?
I know, yes. Right? It's a very clever tactic. And, of course, I have evidence up the wazoo to back up what I'm saying. It's not just tinfoil hat theory. The intersections on the back end of who's funding all this stuff and where the money's going and coming from and who supports it is incestuous. There's no right and left. It's a uniparty. And there's authoritarians. You said this on your show. I believe it was last week, right? There are authoritarians and then there are individualists. The party structure doesn't work anymore. Like left, right, Republican, Democrat. There are those of us who are not afraid of freedom. We're not afraid of liberty, come what may. Okay, maybe I'll be poor, maybe I'll be hungry, maybe this will happen to me, maybe things won't work out to my advantage, but at least I'll be free and I'll be able to make my own decision and chart my own course. And that includes everything, like you said, from speech, worship, education, economy, the whole 9 yards. And then there are those that say, but, I'm a little bit afraid of this, that, the other. Please fix it for me. And those people will gravitate towards party politics because someone's promising they'll fix it for them. We'll do it for you.
Most people follow. I mean, I think if you look at the Asch conformity experiments, which have stuck in my mind ever since I read about them, it's like you find out that most people, maybe as many as 75%, like to follow. They like to follow. They need a leader. They need a party. They need, they need someone guiding them. And
exactly.
And I think that's why, we're tribal. It's like human nature, and people gravitate towards leaders. Well, let me ask you this. So I think for anybody who's uninitiated in this, who is a parent, maybe who is like you, like me, upset about what's happening in the public schools, watching the injection of social justice ideology of things like critical race theory and queer theory, watching the injection of porn in schools, sexually inappropriate material in the public school libraries. I think those parents, some of them, like me, when they first hear about things like cameras in schools, or what can we do to fix the public school system? Okay, so this may be the first time they're hearing someone like you articulate what some of the downside of some of these proposed solutions. So what do you think is the solution? I know you've stated this before on my channel, but what do you say to parents? What's the solution? If they have kids, where do they send them? What do they do?
Well, a lot is going to depend on their individual circumstances. So that's why I say, stop looking for collective solutions to what for you as a parent is an individual problem of your child's education. That ship has sailed. There is not a group solution to this. You're not going to elect the right person and the whole ship is going to turn in the ocean. It doesn't work like that. And it's not going to work like that in time for your child to finish school, even if your kid's in the womb. All right. It's just 13 years. It ain't going to be enough. So deal with the here and now. If your child is in upper middle school, high school, and they're not in serious distress, suicidal, having like major problems, that they're basically reasonably stable, happy kid, etc., your biggest concern at this point is what they haven't been learning. So there's a big learning gap that they just probably don't know stuff. Okay, even if they have A's on their report card, the odds are there's a lot they don't know unless you taught it to them. So focus on keeping your relationship with your children really solid so that they talk to you and they tell you things themselves. Nobody's a more reliable reporter of what's going on in their life than they are if you cultivate an open and honest relationship, which I tell all parents, even when they're, pregnant, like that should be your number one goal, is maintain that close relationship with your child, especially if they're in school. Start having family meals together, start going out as a family. Now, if you've never done it, it's going to be weird, but you're going to have to do it if you intend to leave them in the schools. If you can pull them out partially and appeal to them with the idea of like dual enrollment, like, hey, do some of the rest of your high school at community college and get credit for college and high school at the same time for free. You can kind of pull them out of the environment a little bit more and get some free college credits. So there are things you can do with those older kids to kind of, by that point, their identities are probably pretty well formed as much as they're going to be by the school by like sophomore, junior year of high school. Doesn't mean they're home free, but just pay very close attention and start talking to them. Find out what knowledge gaps they have and see if you can help fill them. If you have young kids younger than middle school, my advice to people is move heaven and earth and get out. That's my best advice. And if you can't, because of court order, foster parenting, like court order being like your divorced parent and the other spouse says you have to send them to school, something like that. Because you can homeschool, or I should say parent direct your kid's education. It doesn't have to be in your home. Okay. If you're working, many people do it, and I could help you figure out how, but the younger your kids are, especially right now, because things are getting worse and worse by the day, move heaven and make the tough choices. That is my best advice to you. Now, the good news, never before in American history have there been so many choices for how you can do that affordably, safely, et cetera. But it starts with you. It starts with the parent deciding that the most important thing to you is your child's health, happiness, and proper launching into adulthood. And if it is, then you'll find the core strength to make the tough choices. If it's not, then you're going to have a lot of workarounds. You're going to have a lot of work. The government is not going to make it easy for you. So just know that it's not easier to leave them where they are. You will face things you can't even imagine, and most notably will likely be the dissolution of your relationship with your child. They won't trust you. They may actually actively turn on you. Worst case, they turn on themselves. We've seen what that looks like. Self-mutilation, self-harm, whether it's cutting or all the way to transitioning, if something like ROGD or whatever. This is a very serious threat right now to kids who are below 6th grade, and even in middle school. But if your kids are already in high school, you have more leg to stand on and more argument for like not upsetting the apple cart. Just be very, very intentional about building a close relationship with them.
This is all great advice, and I want to continue to have you on talking about this because I'm convinced, if we're able to have kids, I'm not putting in them. There's no way I'd put my child in a government school. And I'm convinced that is the answer. But like you said, a lot of parents have issues in their specific case why that's not possible, or court order or what have you. And so
that was my situation. I'm speaking from personal experience. When you're in a divorce situation, if both parents don't agree and you haven't been able to find a judge, and we were homeschooling, and you haven't been able to find a judge who's either pro homeschool or like at least neutral enough on it to keep the status quo and say this is best for the kids to keep the status quo, if they're very pro public school, as my judge was, and they tell you this is how it's going to be, you will go to jail if you try to pull your kids out. That's contempt of court. And so I am as sensitive as they come to the situation of parents who are in that situation where they're like, but Deb, I literally can't. Foster parents are not allowed to either. So I think one thing we could look at from a policy perspective is change that. In other words, make it easier for parents who have been homeschooling, let's say. Okay, so it's the status quo, to make their case without bias on the part of the judges, so that is considered as good a status quo as public school. And also help parents who are foster parents and they're taking care of kids. Now, I know they say, well, we don't want to do it because it might be abusive, whatever. Well, then they shouldn't be foster parents, should they? If we can't do background checks well enough on the foster system to allow them to choose alternative paths, even private school, for the foster kids, then we're doing foster stuff wrong from the outset. So there, we need to take a look at these policies, but I'm very sensitive to that. So I don't want anyone to hear me judging if you're just not ready. But if you're asking me my honest answer, we need to abolish this system. And at the very minimum, you can make a very strong statement by getting a group of people together, a large group, and simply unenroll your children before they do the head count, and you can find out when that is. Each district does it at a different time. They do it a couple times or multiple times a year, how they do their funding. And it's based on head count. So if you unenroll your child before head count, you can always re-enroll them afterwards, but they'll lose some funding. And you might say, well, that's terrible. They should lose it. No, but look how much they're spending on the sex ed, all the DEI, all these things. They have to pay the teachers. They have to keep the lights on, and they have to provide literacy, et cetera. But where you can pull some money away from them is maybe for these extra programs. Although I will tell you, the vast majority of your school's funding comes from your state and not from your county taxes. That's another thing to know.
If parents want to, well, first of all, if they want to watch your content, watch the information that you put out there about the school system and parental rights, they can find you where? It's linked below, but just tell.
Yeah. So my YouTube channel is The Reason We Learn. I do have a private platform, membership platform at wokescreen.com/The Reason We Learn. And I'm not really on Locals anymore, Pirate. I mean, I have an account there, but I don't keep it active because I moved to Woke Screen. And the reason I moved to Woke Screen is that we have a private Discord server where I can deliver much more direct communication and interaction privately to people who have questions. I have two private live streams that I do each week there for members, one on homeschooling, one on just culture stuff, but that's private behind the paywall. And the links all can be accessed through the Discord. And then I also have a separate support group for parents out there who are in the situation that Keri's talking about, where they're in the school and they're like, I can't leave, or I'm not ready to leave, or Deb, that, I kind of hear you, but no. Okay. I created something called The Reason We Parent. It meets twice a week, Wednesdays at noon and Sundays at 7 for up to 2 hours each time, where members can come and they can vent, they can show me curriculum, they can ask me questions, they can, just kind of get moral
I
support.
was going to ask, do you do consultation with parents to help them figure out their unique, whatever their situation is?
And the thing is, I created the support group to be a much more cost-effective way than consulting. Because if they came to me for 1 hour of consulting for the annual fee at The Reason We Parent, they have up to 4 weeks of my time with potentially other people there, but it's private. You don't have to be on video. You can choose a different name, whatever you want. And we talk about these issues, and you can come as many times as you want across a year for just a tiny bit more than 1 hour of consulting time. So you can join as a monthly member and test it out, or you can do for the whole year for $75. But what I did that because I wanted to help more people. I wasn't looking to get rich off of this, but people see a consulting fee and they're like, hey, I don't know if I'm going to get what I need out of 1 hour. Sometimes you talk to someone for an hour and then you have to go think about it.
Yeah.
And these are big decisions. This is, even parents come to me and they'll say, like, I'm dealing with this one bullying incident and I'm trying to figure out if it's worth going to the authorities, if it's worth reporting. We can talk that through. So at The Reason We Parent, which I have pinned to my X profile, it's at the very top, the link that you can go join. That is the purpose of that group. I have people share pictures of a curriculum with me. I have people share links of programs and professional development they know their teachers are doing and ask me to make sense of it. They're like, is this woke? Like, should I be worried about this? And then I know what I'm talking about. I'm not just going, yep, I'm sure it is. I'm actually looking at it and telling them, this is the problem. That's the problem. And we can actually discuss their kid. They'll say, well, my child is very shy, or my child's very outgoing, or my child is this. And my advice is going to be a lot better if we're talking about your individual situation. That's why I started my whole answer with there are individual solutions. There is not going to be a collective solution to your problem. So really, get that in your head and you'll know what to do next.
Thank you for the super chat. Not a Fed for $5. This is G-Man. You can't fool me. You can't fool me, Fed. He says, we need to go in to the auditorium. That's where our problems lie, in the auditorium.
Yeah. I did mention the Panopticon. You guys, I suggest that you research it if you're interested in how being constantly surveilled affects human behavior. Look up the Panopticon. It's based on a novel. It's really important. It was by Jeremy Bentham. Who was a British philosopher. I strongly advise you to read that because it does change your behavior, but not the way you think.
Yeah.
So
it's a great visual for what we're creating currently, not just in the schools, but in society in general.
Yeah, they have cameras everywhere in Britain. What happens? You can't pray on the sidewalk. But look what you can do.
Right.
Over there.
You can do a whole lot if you're doing it in the name of social justice.
Yeah.
Pirate Tomsky says, hit the like button. Thank you, Pirate.
Anyway, that's what I got. That's my argument against adding more surveillance. It is not because I am okay with porn in the classroom. Let me say it again. It is not because I am okay with porn in the classroom. Never was, never will be. Okay.
Dion, I've got a couple things for you from the chat. Dion says the way they're trying to undermine Moms for Liberty right now is disgusting. It is. I've seen that. That means Moms for Liberty is actually being very effective.
Over the target.
Over the target. Nomo says the majority of public schools are academically and morally irreparable. Facts. And that actually reminded me of, where is she? Yarn Chicken and Shit, who says the system's corrupt and I don't know that it's even salvageable. We just opted out.
Correct.
A lot of people are doing so.
And I say go while the getting is good, because simply refusing to comply and being absent from the system does create, by default, a momentum and a political coalition. It's coalition building without having to be a protester or do any kind of activism. You just, with every individual person that makes a choice, increases the likelihood, the momentum in that direction. So you're actually doing something powerful for the culture at large without having to stick your neck out and put a target on your back.
As Deanne says, they're already working to remove that option. Yeah, I learned this past year about, my husband and I got to visit Germany again. He often does music there. And I didn't realize, I guess I'm still learning things about different countries and the way their laws work. And in Germany, it's illegal to homeschool your kids.
Has been since Hitler.
Yeah, since Hitler. They have to go to a government school.
That's correct. And in Sweden, they had private schools and homeschools and parochial schools and so forth until it's a little more than 10 years ago, I think. They came up with a there was the school choice, like you could go to these different places. And then they said, wait, we can't control the quality of all these places while they're getting government money. So they came up with one standardized curriculum for everybody. And now there's effectively no difference. Now all you have is people going to a private school because they want a different milieu in which to operate. And we already see in the United States, they're not even allowing that anymore, whether it's through busing to change the equitable distribution of the seats across races, or whether it's, just reserving a certain amount of lottery spaces for low income and marginalized groups. They're not going to allow us as parents and members of society to sort of arrange ourselves as we see fit. They're really going to make sure that we are sitting with people they want us to sit with.
Mm-hmm. I've got a couple more things for you from the chat, Deb.
Yeah. Oh, Helena Blavatsky. Somebody knows their stuff.
I know, Helena. Therese says, I'm distracted by Deb's sewing machines, as you should be.
I wish I could tilt my camera and you could see my fabric stash.
It's
embarrassingly large.
Therese is one of the wrong knitters, and I believe also a sewist.
Is she? Yeah, I need to get back to it. I used to sew like obsessively, and I made my kids' clothes back when I was homeschooling.
Wow.
And my 3 little girls had the wardrobe like you wouldn't believe. They had homemade dresses with ruffles and all kinds of things. Little fancy boutique pants. The boutique stuff you'd have to go in and spend big. I used to make that. I didn't sell it. I just made it for my own kids. People are like, oh, where'd you get that? I'm like, I made that.
Pirate Tomsky tells you, OMG, you know nothing about stashes with the knitters in this chat.
Yeah,
he would know.
The sewists are just bad with our fabric. Mm-hmm.
And then I've got, a lot of people who found this disturbing and evil. Oh, Karen White from Woke Screen is here. Hi, ladies.
Yes.
Hello. And G-Man, bottom line, homeschool your kids, please, if you can. Plus, Katie McPherson really appreciated the analogy you gave, the affair analogy with the constant, in perpetuity, like that kind of surveillance that just keeps happening.
If you find yourself, and I mean, I dated somebody once where this happened, where I found myself desperately wanting to look inside their phone. And then I said, all right, it's time to leave. Like if you don't trust somebody to the level where you're going to violate your own values of spying and snooping and looking at things. Now it's not, and then let me interrupt myself. I'm not saying it would be spying on the teacher or the kids in a government set. That is not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is it's that level of suspicion. If you have that little trust in the people who are watching your kid for 8 hours a day, 9 months of the year, you need to get your kid out of there. That was why I use the analogy.
I think in that analogy, it's good to get the evidence once so that you know what's happening. And we have that when it comes to schools. We know what's happening in the schools. And so once you have that, then it becomes a question of, now what do you do? Do you just keep gathering for evidence forever? Why? you make it, it's happening now.
Yeah,
So
I think people
what do you do?
genuinely believe if they didn't see their child's teacher on TikTok, it's fine. Or like if they open up the Chromebook to the Google Classroom and nothing jumps out at them as being obviously horrible, that it's fine. And so let me just use the opportunity of this platform to tell you that SEL is everywhere. It just, your district has it, I promise. Equity, DEI is everywhere. Again, your district has it, I promise. So the only thing is a matter of degree. So you may be one of the lucky ones in a school district that still has a lot of old timey teachers who, when they bring in the new programs, they're like, yeah, whatever. And they might like close the door and, like, I'm going to try to not do that as much as I can for as long as I can. And yay, you're lucky. But how long is that going to last? And how many classes does your kid have in a high school class? Your kid has like a teacher for each subject. So maybe their history teacher is awesome, or maybe their English teacher is awesome, but their math teacher is a crazy lunatic. So it's just getting there. And all the teachers, literally all the teachers coming out of teacher college today are social justice oriented, or they wouldn't be doing it.
Yes.
They'd quit.
Deanne has a funny point here. Having a little bit of CRT is like being a little bit pregnant.
100%. Yes. It spreads like kudzu. And so eventually it just takes over everything. And the government money incentives are such that no governor, I don't care how red the state is going to turn away federal dollars. They don't want to be that governor who says, yeah, I told the federal government to stuff it. And we're not taking our IDEA money. We're not taking the lunch money. So we don't have to take the SEL money. I hope they do. Tennessee is the first state where the Republicans in that state said, let's do a research project to see if we could say no. But they're the first state to do it.
Wow.
In 2024. So get on your state legislature and say, please, conservatives, Republicans, libertarians, whoever, could you do the math and figure out if we could tell the federal government to stuff it so we can just run our schools at the state level? And you have half a prayer of having a school that is not completely globalist, crazy cult-like thing.
Texas,
that's the only chance you have. Yeah.
I know we've had some districts that have done that, who've refused to take the state money. I think Grapevine, Colleyville, if I'm not mistaken, is one of those.
And the federal government is busy researching how to prevent them from doing that in the future. I don't think they'll get away with it because, again, you've got with this court anyway, but the way that the courts are going, where they've already ruled, one federal court in Maryland recently ruled that all nonprofit, so any school that's a private school is a nonprofit, that by virtue of being nonprofit, they're getting federal aid and are therefore required to follow Title IX, which is insane. That shows you how far gone our judiciary is. If you can have a federal court, that should go to the Supreme Court, and hopefully this court will say no. But we've got to pay attention to the courts and the legal system, because where freedom is really going to ultimately be tested is there.
Yeah. Okay, Deb, tell people, what do you have coming up? You have a show tonight, right?
I do. I have a show tonight. My Dissonant Dispatch show is my Monday night live show where I kind of like give you the lowdown on something, big or at least controversial. So tonight I am looking at 2030. You've probably heard of it. Mm-hmm. And how it actually manifests, like what it looks like at the classroom level. It kind of backs up this show to illustrate the point that the teacher doesn't put on devil horns and a cape and, start speaking in a German accent like Klaus Schwab or whatever. No, it comes out in these subtle little ways and in these little lessons, and it appears on the social media, and the cameras are in the teacher's hands. Just go look at what they post. You can already find out all you need to know. And I want them to see what it looks like. So I'm going to do a show about 2030 in the classroom, focusing on one district. Just taking one district in New Jersey to show you what it looks like. And you can then follow along with your own district while we do it. Like go to their social media. I'll show you. Then what else? I'm going to be on other people's podcasts this week, but I'm not really sure when or where those will air. So I won't talk about them. But that's what I've got going on next coming up.
Well, thank you for making time to be with us here on
Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
You are one of my favorite people. I love having you on, and your knowledge is so specialized in this in this area of parental rights and,
Thank you.
being an education advocate. Everyone go follow The Reason We Learn. And big thanks to Deb for being here. I think that's it. I think we're going to wrap it up.
All right. Thanks a lot, you guys.
Cool. Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.